for those of us who know what we know, yes, there's been many since integration. I mean, Brown versus Board of Education actually didn't really give us true integration. What it did, it gave us taking Black students out of their neighborhoods and going to white schools. That's not true integration. It also didn't give us integration because neighborhoods are even more so segregated today than ever. So, I mean, I guess it depends on if you buy into the idea that we've really been integrated. We haven't been really integrated. It's really about um, exclusion in many ways at every level of our society, whether it's education, housing, you know, our ability to movement. Right, we don't have the privilege of being able, and I speak to this as a collective. We don't have the ability to be able to just go where we want to go, live where we want to live, because there's been all these structures and barriers put in place. So yes, to answer your question, we are still integrated.
Dan, what is your thoughts on this idea? Being that you're an educator, but you're also kind of a rural educator, meaning that you have more influence on uh, non-minority students, and you have a kind of chance to look at a different culture. How do you see this as a teacher?
Well, from my own personal standpoint, being a white male and having the white privilege all my life, I really, I don't think I was aware of things as they are, uh, maybe until maybe 15, 20 years ago. And um, so, it's a little bit of an education for me before I could even really teach anything along those lines. I sort of had to educate myself. And like you said, I do teach in a rural area. It's primarily white. Uh, so there's the whole cultural. I think maybe you probably would call it tribalism type thing. That I think a lot of the folks where I live, like their families, they see any kind of uh, challenging the status quo in any way. I think they look at it as what have I done wrong? I haven't done anything wrong. So you have a lot of the defensiveness from parents that they don't want to think that they or their parents or their grandparents have done anything wrong as far as inclusion and segregation, and that attitude I think is passed along to their kids. And so when I bring up issues related to inclusion and cognitive race theory, when I bring up anything that kind of touches on those subjects, I kind of have to choose my vocabulary carefully so that I don't, so that the students don't throw up this wall right away. I'm not going to listen to this. This is goes against what he's trying to say something bad about my family and our tribe. So, so like I said, it's kind of a challenge from my angle to present this information in such a way that the students will receive it and hear it rather than just be have a defensive attitude toward it. Did that sort of answer your question, or?
Well, I mean, it brings forth another point of view, which is what we needed. But Demetrius, I'm going to come to you because, as I mentioned, you said that you were giving classes on inclusion at your workplace. Now, when I came home, I remember taking classes where they were called equal opportunity, and you had to learn to integrate that's what we called it back then, because there was this assumption that you came from a different type of environment, so therefore we have to be gentle with you. We have to treat you to almost like children and lead you by the hand because you don't really know what this society is about.
Yeah.
It sounds to me like you're doing the same thing.
Now, I would say we're taking a different approach. I was allowed some latitude within the framework of my organization because I was still, at work. But we were really smart, the group of us, in how we decided to do it. And we told the organization, we will only do this if you allow us to do this with a term we use called radical transparency. So we brought everybody in the room and we told them, you are going to be uncomfortable. It's not a question, right? If you don't think you can handle this, it is okay for you to leave. No one's going to hold it against you. No one's going to be upset. And I said, particularly white men, you're not going to enjoy this. You're going to learn. You're going to be enlightened. You may learn some things about me, yourself, your organization, but you will not be insulted or accused or attacked. And if you feel that way, even for a moment, let me know. I can't promise I'll do anything about it, but you can let me know. So we talked about some life skills first. We really, really soft shoot them. Talked about decision making and communication and cooperation and learning to learn a lot of these nice, and they got comfortable. And then we hit them with a two-piece. we brought critical race theory and white fragility, bang bang, right before they even realized what was happening. And we had I don't like slides. I'm more of a whiteboard person, but it was very inclusive. So once we immediately dropped critical race theory and white fragility on, we recommended a book. And we talked a lot about this book that I had read, and a number of people have read it, called White Fragility. So, some people agree with the concept, some don't. But I talked to, and to their credit, 18 white guys in this conference room, not a single one of them left, and they were all engaged. They wanted to know. And I told them, none of this is personal, but we're approaching it from a term of education. There is so much you don't know that you don't know. That's what I want to get out of it today. So. And that was our approach.
Whether you had anybody who walked out.
Yeah. No, 18 guys. And there were 23 or 24 people total. Not a single white guy walked out. Well, nobody walked out. But they engaged. They fully engaged because right up front, I said, this is radical transparency. I'm going to say things that might make you cringe. I'm going to talk about driving while black. And you don't need to know what that is. Don't feel bad that you don't know what that is. But I'm going to explain it to you. And we're going to talk about systemic racism in terms of mass incarceration and housing and education. And like I said, redlining, we're going to talk all of that. And we spent 6 hours in the conference room, 22 of us in the first session. We ended up doing 5 sessions covering well over 150 people in the organization of all cross section of race and demographic and age, gender, everything. And we eventually expanded this to AAPI, and we did a women's group. So we've done a lot of this within the organization. But the shorter answer to your question is, if you don't approach it with a radical transparency and allow everyone to know upfront, there will be discomfort. We're a family here. There will be discomfort. And if you don't want to be uncomfortable, you have the option to leave now, and it will not be held against you. And there were guys in there who said, I feel like you're talking to me, directly to me. And I said, that's good. That's a great thing, because it means you're hearing what I'm saying. And if we're done and you hear this and you felt like I was talking to you, then we did our jobs. We did our jobs. I don't want anybody to feel bad. And as we left, to a man, all 18 white guys said, I feel horrible. I feel really bad right now. And I said, that's okay. It's okay. But if you go and you take this, you process this, how you talk to your kids, how you talk to your family members, how do you talk when you're with your friends and there's nobody black around? If we impact any of those things, then we've done the right thing. Because all I wanted to do was make them think. Our goal was to make people think and enlighten, right? Enlighten about contributions of African Americans and women. But it was much more always from a base of knowledge. Let's enlighten, let's teach, let's give more information. Because at the end of the day, what that person takes away and does with it is 100% on them. And that was our approach. And I thought it was really effective. We felt like it was really effective.
As a parent, Dahlia, how do you feel about that? And what do you feel that as a parent, that we should teach our kids inclusion, because I mean, you're not raising Gen Z. What are you raising, Gen O? Or I mean, you know, that this is, you know, it's going to, it has to go further down the line, whether you, whatever name you put on it. But, you know, how do we make sure that your kids aren't having the same discussion in 2040?
Yep.
You're on mute.
You're muted.
I know, I always do that. So I wanted to just, can I say something about what Demetrius is doing? I really,
Sure.
yeah, I actually agree with this method. This is something, I'm also a racial equity consultant, Demetrius. So I do a lot of dialogue and circles and workshops on a variety of topics related to like racial equity and just racial relations, right? And a lot of it is, you know what, the caveat is this is going to be uncomfortable. So in order for us to actually start to shift is we have to lean into that discomfort and work through it, and not just like sit in the guilt or sit in the shame, because that's not taking any action. And then, right, you have to process it, figure out, okay, how can I as an individual influence my environment, my community, you know, my family, all that stuff. So definitely, I mean, and that's what I agree with that. I think so when we talk about children, yes, it's very important to educate, or to allow a space for children to listen, to learn, for us to hear from kids, to understand their experience. You know, I know, you know, James, that I run a social justice camp in the summertime. So I'm kicking it off again for this summer. And we'll be going over this, you know, the topics about, you know, self and identity and microaggressions and the history of race and racism. And then really, and it's really experiential learning, meaning that this is a dialogue. It's not, as one of the co-creators, I'm not lecturing, right? It's providing some information or, you know, some content, and then having a dialogue with the kids about what, you know, what do you see? You know, what's going on in your life? One thing that we learned last year when we first started this camp was that the particular with the microaggression workshop day, they were like, oh my God, this happens. This happens to us all the time, or we see it happening to friends. And we just didn't know how to name it, and we didn't know how to handle it. So you see what I'm saying? Our kids are experiencing this feeling of not feeling included on many different levels. And so this is an opportunity for us to open up those that dialogue as well.
Dan, you want to kind of chime in? Like I said, you know, we have three different viewpoints here. You know, how do you see, you know, things such as, Dahlia, you know, one of the things that, you know, you've had heard some conversations between me and Nick, so I can be very guilty of microaggressions. Major aggression sometimes, but yeah, that's another story. But anyway, Dan, you have something to add here as far as you know, the coming from the educator's standpoint, especially when you're dealing with a majority that's trying to understand the minority.
I don't know that I have anything to add at this point. Like I said, I feel like I need to even still educate myself so that I'm able to present the information and present it in such a way that the students will receive it. Unlike Demetrius, I don't really have the luxury of telling them they're going to be uncomfortable and that they can walk out.
You can't do that. Yeah, yeah, you can't do that.
No, I can do it. I kind of have to choose my words carefully beforehand, and I actually do that. I think of what vocabulary I'm going to use when presenting a certain, you know, bit of information, words not to use, and if you present it in the right way, I can get students to kind of be receptive to the information. Like I said, I myself need to learn more myself to bring up issues like being a white guy. I haven't been aware of a lot of these things, because I've lived sort of in the white privilege bubble,
Mhm.
not not intentionally, but uh, that's the reality of it. And so I feel like I need to educate myself more from listening to folks like you, and learning what the concepts are, how to present them in such a way that they'll be received.
James,
Uh,
James,
yes,
may I say
yes,
may I say something to Dan as well?
sure.
Yeah, Dan, if you're open to it, I have two books in particular that I'm thinking about that might be a good resource for you.
That'd be
Um,
great.
I can share it with you the names of them.
That would be awesome. Yeah, I
You
would appreciate
you you can share with all of
With all
us.
of
I
us.
mean,
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah. But it's okay. You can share with all of us, Dahlia, if you want to.
Sure, let
So,
me go. I'm just gonna go grab the book. If you don't mind, I'll be right back, okay?
Sure.
okay, all right.
And
Uh,
and yeah, one I want to add a little feedback to Dan. The approach you're taking right now is the best approach. You said right up front, I don't know what I don't know, and that's sort of you said living within that bubble. You don't know, you can't know,
Right.
and I had to spend a lot of time up front convincing my Caucasian friends it is not your fault that you don't know certain things, and we had spent a lot of time helping these men appreciate that they could be vulnerable. Like this is not a fight. We're all in this room because we're all working toward the same goal. And one guy in particular just said, I don't know what am I supposed to say? Can I say black? Do I have to say people of color? And I said, it doesn't really matter. We don't really care. Say whatever you feel. I mean, there were certain things you can't say for sure, but be okay in your discomfort. And two of them in particular told stories about one guy, Hank, said, look, I was a kid in college and I just got in all kinds of trouble. And I didn't have to worry about things you have to worry about. My dad knew a guy who knew a guy, and I would get in bar fights and I knew I'd be fine. I didn't have to worry about that kind of stuff. You can't do that. And he said, I didn't know literally until like now, you couldn't do certain things that I could do. And I told him, it's not your fault you didn't know. Don't worry about that part. It's about now going forward. So I love that you said, hey, I understand that I was in a bubble. That's such a huge step that you can understand and appreciate and acknowledge that you're well on the way where a lot of other people haven't gotten to yet. That's literally the first step.
Demetrius, I'm going to kind of kick back on both you and Dan here because I'm going to liken this once again to, like the law.
Okay.
Ignorance of the law is no excuse. Okay. That's one of the famous things that they say. And it sounds to me, like when you say, well, it's not your fault that you don't know. It's kind of like grandma used to put, your castor oil, she used to put sugar in it.
Right.
It would go down, but it was still castor oil.
Right.
And what I'm saying is, a lot of things that I've learned were not necessarily taught to me by other people.
Sure.
There's a thing called research. And if you continuously see injustice, don't you have a certain obligation for you to do your own research rather than wait for someone to come and explain to you how, whether you're supposed to say black or whether you're supposed to say people of color? I mean, I'm 74. I've been a Negro. I've been a black man. I've been, some of those other words, so I've kind of went the gambit. I don't, at this particular point, I'm not really sure who I am. Am I African descendant of slaves?
Sure.
I don't know, who, well, I don't say, I don't know who I am, but I'm saying in general,
Yeah.
we have so many labels. How do we, get to this common point?
I think it goes back with two things. One, I don't know that I agree with your statement about when you continuously see it, because white people don't continuously see it. They don't see it at the level we see it. And I had a coworker who came to me and said, listen, I enjoy working with you, we hadn't known each other long. He says, but I'm going to be honest. I don't know a single black person. I'm not close to a single black person. I don't know. I had cracked a joke in the meeting, and the one black guy in the meeting got the joke and nobody else did. It was harmless, but Tom came to me and said, I didn't get the joke, and I fear it's because I'm white. I don't want to say anything wrong. I don't want to do anything wrong. I don't know what I don't know. And I had so much respect for him for coming into my office, sitting down with me and saying, don't let me say anything stupid. If I say something wrong, correct me, help me out, because I just don't know. I grew up in this small town in Ohio, and I just don't know that many black people. So they don't know. Everybody doesn't know. And you can't penalize someone for not knowing. And so the second piece, the rest of what you said starts with basic human behavior. So sometimes we'll dip into talking about legislation and what we can do. Sometimes it's different. It's just caring for others. It's basic empathy, right? Sharing, having the capacity to understand other people's feelings. We have to start at the very, very basics. How you speak to people, how you listen, how you give feedback, how you observe, and I think when we start there and you go on to how we make decisions, how we work with other people, and then you have to get at a high level to like critical thinking. When you think about how am I casting my votes? How am I dedicating my time and my resources? How can I impact other people's lives? It starts really at the basic human level, right? But I don't expect anyone to know. I'm at a point now in my life where I don't expect anyone to have had the same experience I had growing up, the child of two people from Alabama. I grew up in Flint, Michigan. No, I don't know that anyone's experience is exactly like mine. So I don't expect anyone to know anything. I expect them to give me the courtesy of listening to my perspective and working with me to get to wherever we need to get to. That's kind of how I think it is. Ignorance of the law is a really good excuse because in my household growing up, Mary had a simple rule: 3 cookies at a time. I wasn't going to say I didn't know I could only eat 3 cookies. That 4th cookie was going to get me in trouble, and I knew it. But if I didn't know, if she never said only 3 cookies, I'd eat 10 cookies. Who doesn't eat cookies, right? So I think there's a degree of that we have to enlighten. Some of us have to enlighten some others. You're right. There's research. People can learn and figure out, look on the internet, anything they want to know now. There is nothing that Dan, for example, all due respect, could find out on the internet that he would not much, much more quickly and effectively find out from you, I, or Dahlia. I think you can't replace that, and that's why when that guy came into my office and sat down with me and said, listen, I don't know. It felt to me like that's like a really, really smart thing to do.
Well, I have to get going. But I'm putting in the resources in here so that you have it. But let me just quickly show it. Can you see this?
Yes, thank you very much.
A little bit to the right.
There you go. Right there,
nice.
We can see it.
Okay.
So it's Cultivating Genius. It is really about setting up an anti-bias education, which this is a really good resource.
Okay.
And I put the name in the chat.
Okay.
This one. Dan, the majority of the kids that you teach, are they white children?
The majority, I would say like maybe 92, 93%.
Okay, so that's majority. So I also work with white kids as well.
Bring it the other way, Dahlia.
Towards your face. There you go.
There you go. Okay.
I also work with white kids, and these 2 books I'm going to show you are really good resources and gives me more insight into how to speak to children who are white regarding these topics. Okay, so this one is again anti-bias multicultural education for young children, and the final one is this I recommend to my white parents who are like, what do I do? So I want to be more involved. I think educators who are also parents and are mentors for our children, this is a good one too. It's called Raising White Kids, and it's from a racial equity perspective too.
Could you put that one on the chat also? So
I will. Yep, I'm doing that right now. But I just wanted to share those with you as resources that I feel are easy to read, easy to understand, and very insightful. Very insightful.
Excellent.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
Any final thoughts you have for us, Dahlia, before you leave?
No,
I'm gonna get you on for a whole show, so you.
I know. I don't have much to say except that we just continue doing and influencing in the ways that we know how to. And we're all learning, Dan. I do feel that as a Black woman, I have additional information because of my reality of living in the United States. But at the same time, I'm always learning. So just like you're learning, we're learning too how to figure this mess, how we're all figuring this stuff out, right? Because we definitely haven't mastered it.
I'm gonna have to step away for a second.
Okay. All right. So, all right, Dahlia, thank you very much. And, whenever you have time,
Great meeting
want
you.
you-
Thank you for the resources.
I'm almost done typing it in.
Okay.
Okay.
all right. Demetrius, I don't know, man. I get you on, and now I can't find Bill. I can't find Bo, man.
We can do it. We can do a Sports Crib Monday if you want. Seriously, no. I think we're talking about good stuff. I'm kidding.
Actually, going back to the ignorance of the law is no excuse. And I know this is supposed to be about inclusion, but once again, I find myself looking at the track record. Okay.
Right.
And I look at, going back to when I was a young man, SNCC, Black Panthers,
Right.
Urban League, NAACP. Black people knew who Whitney. I can't think of Whitney Young.
Yep.
We knew who they were. We knew who Stokely Carmichael was. Nowadays, I find with Gen Z, I find the need to protest, but I don't see the need to follow through. Does that make sense to you?
I have to disagree with you. I have to disagree with you, though. I think.
Okay, that's what the show's about.
Right. So I think the best example of that, your Stokely Carmichael of this age, her name is Stacey Abrams. I think your example is down in Georgia, right? A state that had never been, and it becomes about, at this point, understanding the value of your vote, understanding the meaning of your vote, the power of legislation. That's where the millennials are, right? Some of them are in whatever direction they're in, and I'm not even speaking from a left-right perspective. Their focus in the 60s, Stokely and the group back, they were fighting for simple rights from an equality standpoint. The challenge now is there are people who are trying to suppress your right to vote, like your amendment rights, your constitutional rights. And people like Stacey Abrams are educating millennials, and millennials are now coming together as groups to make decisions to impact, because these systemic fixes that we really want, we talk about a lot. They're legislative. I've said that word 5 times on this podcast for a reason. For me, protests are great. Protesting for the right things is what matters. And if we're not trying to get elected officials to truly represent all of us using the power of our vote, that example, Georgia, January 2nd, January 4th, 5th, I might have the date wrong. That is the best example of that power, because that was grassroots. That was a set of people, not just Stacey Abrams, by the way. There are a lot of people involved in that who made a change in a state where we would not have guessed that type of change would have happened. That is the power of a group of people getting together, like-minded people getting together. You can disagree with their politics. That's not actually the point I'm trying to make. That was a group of people who felt the change was necessary, and they worked together at a real grassroots level, similar to what our parents and grandparents did in the 60s. Your peers, James, did in the 60s and made change happen. That's the best example for me. The election as a whole, but particularly Georgia and those 2 Senate seats.
Well, let me kind of clarify, because I wasn't really referring to millennials. I was referring to Gen Z,
Okay.
because this is what I think that our goal should be, is to make sure that they're the ones who make a better world. And I think that we have to set a foundation for them, which is the millennials.
Right.
But I'm not sure that the millennials see the seriousness of not only educating Gen Z, but to show them that being active means more or goes deeper than just the protesting of an idea. Dan, what's your thoughts? Do you see Gen Z, especially white Gen Z, trying to make this type of transition, or do you see them trying to maintain the status quo?
I think it depends on the person. I see the certain elements that want to maintain the status quo. I think there's some that would like to see some progress. One of the things you said earlier made me think of a question that someone asked me when I was in, I think it might have been in elementary school. I was complaining about some policy the school had, and several of my students we were complaining about it. And we got all kind of cocky, and we went down to the principal's office and told the principal we didn't like this idea. Well, I don't remember what it was. And so the first thing he said to us was, "Okay, you don't like the idea." He said, "So what do you propose that we do instead? Like, rather than just having a complaint, what's your solution?" So, kind of transferring that information to my present situation, I think people that are trying to make a change, I think they need to present what they want specifically, so that people that are trying to learn know what it is that what's the goal, what's the objective, what are we moving toward, rather than just maybe not completely just what are we moving away from, but what are we moving toward? What does that look like? Am I making any sense at all?
Oh yeah, I think you're right. You're absolutely right. Identifying a problem is often easy, but if you come and just tell me about the problem,
right,
you're absolutely right. My next question is, okay, what's the fix? So you have to approach problem solving in that way, not just looking at a problem to say that's a problem. What the critical thinking and determining solution is where the value is understanding how to fix it. I agree with you 100%.
I've been teaching my senior English class during the pandemic because it was such an odd year and we had students online so much. I had to change up my curriculum quite a bit. And one of the things I've noticed with just the public in general is it seems like the general public, at least in my area, it seems like they lack critical thinking skills.
Yep.
So I started just like a basic unit. It's not really a unit because I did it throughout the entire year, but on critical thinking skills and logic, and presenting them with logical fallacies, and so that when they hear some of these, mostly coming from the right wing, of course, these ideas to promote the status quo, and then they present the public with some goofy argument, maybe you'd see on Fox TV or Newsmax or whatever. Now they have the skills. If I've done my job, they'll have the skills to see why this is a stupid argument. It's a logical fallacy. So I actually have these cards here. I don't know if you can zoom on.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
It's like a card named you can use it for card games. It's critical thinking cards, and it has different examples of different logical fallacies, and so I've been starting to do that, and I think sometimes before you can present an argument for change, they have to understand why maybe the opposing position really doesn't make any sense.
Yep.
Now, Dan, you also said that you were looking up something about the teachers union as far as
Yeah. Let me see here. I saw it, and the two largest teachers unions in the United States, the National Education Association and the American Federation of Teachers, they've both put out statements saying that they will pay legal fees for any teacher who refuses to follow any kind of goofy laws like they're trying to set up in Texas, Governor Abbott, about teaching critical race theory, and any teacher that says, well, hey, I'm going to teach accurate history. I'm going to teach what really happened because it's history, and people need to know the truth. And if a teacher would be, I don't know if sued's a word, because they were teaching critical race theory or ideas related to critical race theory, the teachers' unions will pay for the legal fees.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the stand they've taken. So I'm kind of happy about that, because I know if I would do something, and I don't think this would happen, because I think my administration's a pretty decent administration. But if something to that along those lines would happen, I have the teachers' unions to back me up.
Yeah, that's critical, James, because 21, I'm going to say, states right now have adopted these. I believe Dan used the word goofy rules, where they try and place limitations on what teachers can teach, and they try and be tricky about it. They'll use words like balance, and you can't give deference to certain things versus others. So they make it very, very subjective, and I think that it is great that a national union for teachers will support. I think they're going to need to. Unfortunately, my home state of Michigan is one of the states, and that saddens me. But I think that this will, over the next year, be as critical a topic in our country as any. And one thing I just want to reiterate one thing Dan said about critical thinking. One of the elements, as I was taught critical thinking, which he touched on multiple times, and I've always thought it's the most important. It is, as I was taught, it's called consider alternate responses. And that is the idea where you determine how you feel about something. Taking 180-degree view, it allows you to analyze your own viewpoint to see if you're actually right, but it also gives you a complete way of thinking about it so that you can then better approach, discuss, convince, debate, whatever it is you want to do to that person on the other side. Considering alternative responses is so important in critical thinking to help you walk in and address any situation. We did a lot of that discussion in the exercises I mentioned earlier, just understanding how to think critically and say, am I really observing this situation correctly? Am I examining my own unconscious biases and different reactions that I have that I may not know about? And then do I consider all alternatives? A lot of this boils down to just that, putting yourself in someone else's shoes and thinking about how they may think about it. A lot of this can be rooted back to that before you decide how you actually want to respond or react. That critical thinking process is so important and lacking, by the way.
So let me kind of understand this here. It's okay for me to talk about the Pilgrims and the first Thanksgiving, but I can't talk about Custer's Last Stand.
Sure, you can talk about anything you want. Understand the consequences of talking about. Oh, you mean teaching? You mean as a teacher?
Right.
Oh, I'll let Dan take the teacher.
I used to teach when I had sophomore English. I taught of Plymouth Plantation, and I don't. it was just excerpts from a Plymouth Plantation, when about the Pilgrims and everything from from their perspective, and it was written by them, and I forget the author now. But anyway, they talked about the Native Americans and basically how they saved their lives, and then the Pilgrims would turn right around after these Native Americans basically saved them from dying, and then they turned right around. The Pilgrims turned right around and put all these restrictions on them. Though
Right.
it was very unequal. Like they had this big list of rules that they came up with, and one of them was that the Native Americans could not enter the Pilgrim camp with any weapons. But it didn't say anything about the Pilgrims going to their camp with weapons. And if any of the Native Americans stole any of their tools or knives or gardening tools, the chief would have to make that Native American return the item. But it didn't work the other way around. And I pointed that out to them. I said, what do you notice about all these rules? And eventually some of them picked up on, it only works in one direction. I said, yeah, why do you think that is? And so we did have a conversation about it. A lot of times that's how I will present information, is I'll bring up a topic and let them talk about it. Now, I'll point something out to them and let them discuss it. And they kind of on their own said, gee, it doesn't look like it's equitable. It's not, doesn't work the same in both directions. So I brought that up without actually having said anything about it, specifically. Can discover it on their own, so to speak.
Dan, I'm going to go to one of those places where Demetrius talked about, one of those uncomfortable places. What do you think when a white person tells you that they don't see color?
I have a good friend who likes to tell me that, and he does. He does see color. He likes to delude himself into thinking that because in his neighborhood there was an old woman, an African-American woman, who was apparently a very sweet lady and was very nice to all the kids in his neighborhood. And he always talked about how much he loved her and she was so nice and all this. And therefore, he doesn't see color.
Yeah.
When it's very obvious from other things he says, his political views and things, it's very obvious he does see color. But he uses that as sort of his rationale for, well, I'm not a racist. I don't see color. Well, it's difficult to present it to one of your friends, and any help I can have presenting it to folks like that, I would appreciate it.
Yeah, and I recently had that challenge. Someone very close to me who I care for deeply struggles with that, and she said to me, "When I see you, I don't see black." And I said, "How can you not? I need you to see me, see black, and then see the rest of me. Not seeing it is the worst thing, because now you're not appreciating my heritage. You're not appreciating my experience. You don't see me. If you say you don't see black, you don't see me. Is that all I am? No. Is that a huge part of what I am? Of course. It shapes me. You can't understand me if you don't see it." So I like the way your immediate answer was kind of a chuckle at this guy. Like, you didn't really want to call him your friend, and you kind of chuckled a little, and then you said he does, because that's the answer. That's what that means. Someone says I don't see color, they absolutely see color. You can't. I get it. There's an entire chapter, or multiple chapters in the book White Fragility about what that individual is trying to do and express in that moment. And it's a defense mechanism, is what it is. It is, hey.
There is a lot of defense, I think, and a lot of it, they don't want to feel that white people have ever done anything wrong, and they don't want to feel that because maybe, I don't know, they just don't want to feel that they've done anything wrong. That's one of the comments I'll hear from folks in my area a lot is, "Well, I never had a slave."
Right.
Well, there's more to it than that.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah. I've never had a slave mentality. So, which is something, a whole different perspective, when you think of the black experience. Demetrius, how how do you measure your success rate in this program? Because I mean, we try to standardize things and bring them down to a percentage. The class is successful if so many people graduate. Well, you're not quite in that type of situation where you have graduation, but how do you measure your success rate?
Sure. I think specifically in our program, it is about people of color in leadership in our organization. It is about diversity and how we hire and how we promote. That was our goal. So we were not happy with the results. When we really looked at the data, we were not comfortable with what we saw in terms of people of color above a certain level, above the level of manager. It was a very small number. We didn't like the disparity in pay equity with women. We did not like that there was no program for this facility on the south side of Chicago that's 98% Black and Hispanic. How do these people move up in the organization? So when you do it in an organizational framework, at the end of the day, metrics drive behavior. That's just it. So we put a number, and we did some creative things such as blind resumes. So when a manager interviews, they don't have a name because, not to make anyone feel comfortable, their names, you can tell, right? If the resume says Chad, you can guess, right? If the resume says there are different ways, if it says Demetrius, you probably can guess. So we created ways where the HR group, those resumes, you can't tell if it's a man or woman, their age or anything about them. You are assessing them based on their skills and their skills alone. We put together a development program that has to be these people rising up in the organization has to be a certain percentage of people of color, because we acknowledge that there was an issue in the organization at a leadership level. And when you talk about strategic, it's not just to meet a quota, but strategic innovation and diversity and strategy for a company rooted in the south side of Chicago, and yet we don't have the diversity at the top. That's a disconnect. And our leadership sat down with us, this group of white men, said, we understand this is a problem. We understand from a representation standpoint. We stood the leadership team in a window, and the facility is built where the leadership sits upstairs. And we just went on the floor and said, look up at that group of people, tell us who represents you. And with a 97% Black and Hispanic workforce below the level of manager, we got a lot of, I don't see anyone there who represents us. So leadership understood the value of representation, innovative strategy in leadership and diversity in the culture. And so we developed those programs. But what drove us, what continues to drive us, are metrics. Because in a corporate environment, that's the thing. We measure it. We measure it every month. We measure how many people of color get interviews, because we don't tie the metric to hires, because that's not really it. That's not how you do it. You have to bring them in and let them prove they deserve the job. But we just weren't interviewing enough diverse candidates. So those are the metrics we've done. The pay equity for women, harder nut to crack. It's going to take us a while, and it is certainly at the top of our board. It in my mind seems the easiest to crack. Right now, we are not hitting that metric, but we took a 3-pronged approach, and we're attacking them with legitimate metrics that are visible in the facility, visible on our dashboards, and everybody knows. We know how many diverse candidates we interviewed last month. We know the ratio of male to female in pay in certain positions above a certain level, and so we're being radically transparent about it in my organization. That makes me very proud, and to be a part of it. And there is a way to do it. We hope that this carries on outside of our organization, talking about it with people, finding creative ways. We didn't invent any of this stuff. All this stuff is being done in other places, in other organizations. We got on the train a little later than we wanted, but we're on and we're committed. So yeah, we have specific ways. Welcome, Mr. Sanders, by the way.
Yes, Mr. Sanders, how you doing? He was actually the reason for me to think about this series on inclusion, because he's the author of a book, Race Against Race, And one of the things that we discussed earlier when he was on the first show, Demetrius, and this kind of goes back to the sports crib thing, because as you can see, Mr. Sanders is an accomplished athlete.
Absolutely.
Not only did he go to Cheney, but he also went to Villanova. And part of his book is making that change from being a black athlete at a black college going to a white college.
Yeah. One experience to the other.
Right. But, you know, one of the things that I always thought is, if you have that background as an athlete, there are certain doors that are open to you that might not be open to the average person, black or white. Number one, you already understand that team concept. Number two, if you're an athlete and you're part of a team, then you're automatically assumed to be that notch above. Because, I mean, you know, this is what you've grown up. You've grown up as a jock. You've always wanted to be better than that other guy, and you've always depended upon that to kind of define who you are. So, Bo, what do you think? I mean, you know, I think I asked you this before, but do you feel that you had an advantage as a black athlete? You know, because I know even in the service, you know, if you were black and you made the team, it kind of gave you that status.
Well, first of all, Mr. King, thanks for inviting me again. Demetrius, great to meet you. Dan, thanks for having me on and joining the crew. Listen, we are Americans, and the American process is an experiment. So everything we do, no matter what industry, no matter what sport, no matter what entertainment field, because we are Americans and there are so many different type of Americans, everybody's experience is different. So I can answer your question, Mr. King, by giving you a general answer, but I also can answer your question by giving you my personal experience that may or may not be like the other person's experience, right? Because everybody's experience is different. And so as I logged in and I caught, the last piece of Demetrius' conversation, he was talking about the dashboard and the metrics and all those things based on what they're trying to accomplish. Well, when you think about sports, an analogy would be similar to a depth chart.
Yep.
Right? You've got a depth chart, right? And the coaches are in the room, right? And they're going down their depth chart to see, who's the starting quarterback, who's the backup quarterback, who's the third string quarterback. And then they do that for every single position, right? Because the starting quarterback could get injured. Who's your backup? The backup has to be just as good so the offense doesn't miss a beat, right? And the same way works on and I don't really like using offenses as an example because I was a strong safety, right? But so let's switch to the defense. Generally, either the middle linebacker or the strong safety is going to be the captain of that starting 11. So that captain has the same job responsibilities to call the play that the coaches call from the sideline and make sure all 10 of the other guys are in the right position based on the play that they call. So when it comes to me and how I was able to adjust from growing up in an all-black environment, attending the oldest HBCU in the country, Cheney University, founded in 1837, and then getting an opportunity to move up from Division II level to the Division I AA level, I couldn't turn that opportunity down, right? I didn't leave Cheney because I was unhappy I didn't fit in. No. I loved Cheney. It was a great experience. I was used to that experience because of where I grew up in my Black community. But Villanova, at a Division I AA level, I wasn't even thinking about the academics. I was thinking about, playing on that higher level. So as a Black athlete at a HBCU, Demetrius, you know this. Mr. King, you know this. Dan, you may not know this. But at a Black school, athletes are not necessarily the big man on campus.
Right.
It's the drum. It's the drum major.
Exactly. Right.
It's the homecoming king. It's the student class president. Right. So the athlete isn't competing with just other athletes. The athlete is competing with all the other activities and identities on that campus, because we know at a Black school, we pay real close attention to the drum major and the marching band and the class president and the homecoming king, because those positions are held to a high standard. Yep. Right. So then when I get to Villanova, the marching band is not the same type of culture from the Black community. The homecoming king isn't looked at the same way or held to a high standard the way we do it at an HBCU. So my experience transferring was not necessarily how my classmates viewed me and how my coaches viewed me. It was, for me, that's why I wrote my book, Race Against Race, My Journey of Diversity and Inclusion Through Sports. My job was to acclimate, assimilate, and embrace my new environment, right? That was my goal and my job, because I was in a new environment. I had plenty of Black teammates, even though the small number of us, right? When I arrived at Villanova in 1984, I was one of 5 Black athletes on the team out of 100. Wow. Okay? Yeah. There was one Black coach and all the other coaches were white. So, and I say that to say this, my Black teammates, the 4 of them, had more diversity in their experience in athletics than I did, because my career, starting from 8th grade, which back then we called junior high, they call middle school now, right? And then senior high, I was coached by Black men. I didn't have a white teammate ever, and I never had a white coach. Wow. So when I get to Cheney, no white teammates, no white coaches. So when I get to Villanova, there's one Black coach and a total of 5 Black athletes. So I had to adjust to my new environment. And how did I do it? I did it because my teammates, white and Black, who had diversity in their previous experience, right? They were able to help me navigate and embrace my new environment, because again, they had diversity coming up playing Pop Warner, Little League, under 70 pound and all that kind of stuff. I didn't start playing until I got in 8th grade. So that, and then based on where I lived and my mom not having the ability to afford for her to drive me across town or anywhere to play Pop Warner football. She was too busy working and raising 4 kids, right? So I was already behind the 8 ball. So I didn't have time to focus on things that other athletes may had an opportunity to focus on, meaning I wasn't concerned with my lack of diversity being at Villanova. My main focus was I wanted to make the team. And I was prepared to do everything and anything possible to make the team. So because there was less than, it was probably, and I'm going to use a round number. Let's say it was 2% minorities on the campus of Villanova at that time. It probably was 1, but let's say it was 2%. That's not a lot of minorities on the campus of a university, right? I didn't totally. I mean, it was on my mind. It started out in the front of my mind, and then it went to the back of my mind. The more and more I got adjusted, but it was on my mind. But I wasn't focused on it so much that it took away from what I was trying to accomplish, which was make the football team gain respect as a D1 player. Right? Those are the things I was thinking and focused on. And again, I grew up in the South. In my book, I call it the former Southern Confederate South, because I was from the South and I never experienced it while I was in the South, right? But I heard about the history that we had in the South. So I knew and was aware of what the possibilities could be. So therefore, I wasn't nervous. I wasn't uncomfortable. I knew I could recognize if somebody was having a microaggression against me or an overt aggression against me. But guys, I was 6'2", 200 pounds. Who was going to bother me?
Exactly.
Right?
Right.
Who was going to bother me? So I literally, because, and I don't think I was different, but I know that there are a lot of athletes in the past year, right? Based on after when George Floyd was killed, a lot of athletes started feeling comfortable during this racial reckoning of describing their experience that they had with coaches or on a particular campus and that kind of thing. And that's their truth, right? My goal in writing my book was to take a different approach. My approach was to write about the positive things that happened to me, because we've all heard it. You catch more flies with honey than you do with vinegar.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now again, that doesn't mean the stories that people are telling aren't powerful and valuable. What it means is I wanted to tell a different story, because all the stories need to be told, not just a select few stories need to be told. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, there's value in every journey.
There's value in everything. So my experience, Mr. King, was different. I took it differently, and that's not to say. And again, in my book, I write about the hardships I went through. Right? I never earned that scholarship. I had to work study program where I had to work and pay my way. I was homeless for about a week because I didn't have enough money to pay for room and board. I only had enough money to pay for tuition. And therefore my teammates came to my rescue and allowed me to, back then we used to call it, crashing, I would crash on their couch, crash surfing or something like that. I would crash on their couch.
Couch surfing.
Yeah, couch surfing. That's what it was. Sleep on their floor for a night or two, and literally, I went from one room to another room to another room of Black teammates who had my back, right? And then one day, out of the blue, I'm staying with Jeff Dingle and Xavier Hargrove. And I come out of the room, I knock on my teammate's room next door. We had just come out of preseason practice, the beginning of the season, and I stuck my head in the door to say hello to our backup tight end, who was my year, junior, and the backup quarterback, freshman, but starting punter. They're both white. I stuck my head in the room just to say hi, see how they were doing. They heard that I was homeless, and immediately out of their mouth, after I said hello, Big Country was Rich Lage's, the tight end's nickname. He says, I heard you're having some hardships. I said, yeah, I'll work it out. And that's the same thing I said to everybody. Give me a couple of days, I'm going to work it out. So Jeff Dingle and X-Man are allowing me to sleep in their room. These guys step up to the plate and say, Bodine, why didn't you stay with us the whole year? Enough of that couch surfing.
Yeah.
That was powerful. So a third of my book is about that relationship that I built with my two specific white teammates and how we were able to accomplish a lot from being roommates for a full year. And that's the bulk of the story.
That's pretty awesome. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, as I said, that was one of the reasons because you know, you hear all of the horror stories, and you know, but yours was a very positive story. And you know, as I said, from an athlete's point of view, it's all about making it the team. And I kind of feel like maybe that's the excuse that my generation has used, that we were so busy trying to make the team that we forgot that, you know, making the team is all right, but, you know, you have to bring maybe somebody along with you, or you have to be a little more open to maybe losing some of your luster. You know, like, you know, you want to be that starting tight end. You want to be that starting strong safety, but you also want to mentor that third string safety. Demetrius, you've played a little sports. Do you understand, you know, what I'm saying by that? Strive to be excellent, that strive to make the team rather than worry about who's going to be your backup.
Yeah, and I think some of that goes back to some of the human stuff. I think Dan probably deals with this as an educator. With a group of people that aren't the same, getting them to work together is a challenge. I have a story somewhat similar to Bodine's. I was not nearly as good as he was, but in high school, when I was 5'11", 180, I had what we call wheels. I could run. So I played center field, and I was good because I could hit. I could hit fastballs. When I got to D1 and started seeing real curveballs, I had to study harder. But between my senior year of high school, when I was recruited, and my freshman year at Michigan State, I grew 4 inches and gained about 30 pounds.
Wow.
So now I'm 6'3", 215, 220, and I do not have wheels. It's all legs. And so the shortstop just came to me and said, "We need your bat. I'll move to third base. We'll kick him to center field. You can play short." I probably didn't have the arm to play third, but I could play short. So he says, "I will move. I'll shift my position. I'll move over to third. We'll kick John out to center field. You can come play short." Because, I mean, it was his nice way of saying, you know, you're slow now, right? Which I knew. I did not need him to tell me that. But I mean, he's a white guy, and he came to me and said, "Your bat is valuable enough to the team." And he was my friend. He was a good guy, and I knew what he was saying. And he did it in a way that I appreciated because accepting that yourself, recognizing that yourself is difficult. And the way he did it, I really appreciated. And from a standpoint of, I mean, we hung John out to dry. We threw John out to center field. But that he came and he appreciated that, hey, you have some leadership skills that you bring to the team. We value, because in the end, all this, my story aside, is about valuing diversity. The very first step is, I believe Bodine will tell you, when those guys said that, I don't know if he had called that guy Big Country before that, but Big Country took on a new meaning to him probably after that moment, because there is a view there. Oh, wait, this guy wants to help me. And it wasn't that he didn't know. Well, no, it was exactly that. He didn't know, but he didn't even know he didn't know. But that is the enlightenment that happens actually in both directions. And so when this guy who I did not feel was invested, my teammate, was invested in my personal success, totally on his own, sacrificed and said, for you, yes, for the team, but it also helps you. Those are those moments where you see that and you go, wow, you're thinking about working as a team, and you think about cooperation and all these things that you should just have as a human being. The ability to work in social settings and show leadership when needed, engage in conversation and problem solving. This guy came to me and just solved the problem. We went to the coach together and said, you know, we'll get John on board. Don't worry. This is what we want to do. And the coach was like, that's a good idea. And when you were telling that story, I was thinking about that moment because I knew my days in center field were over. And I was thinking, how do we continue to play baseball if we can't run? So it is so much of that. And that goes back to like a human aspect, though, seeing people for who they are and valuing diversity.
I agree.
Dan, what about from an education point of view? You want to step in here?
In regard to sort of being a team player?
Yes.
I wonder how you get your students to value, not even diversity, just differences in each other, separate from even race. Maybe it's gender, maybe they come from different socioeconomic backgrounds. Do you, in terms of like developing your curriculum even, how do you, I think it will be a challenge for me, but do you take that on as sort of your responsibility?
I teach English. What I try to do, mostly what I do as far as diversity issues, I kind of try to tie into novels that I have the students read. And like the one novel I have them read is called The Watsons Go to Birmingham, 1963. And I don't know if any of you have read it or not. It's by a gentleman that I believe his last name is Curtis. And it's an entertaining story. It's a family from Flint, Michigan in 1963. They're African American, and that it isn't constantly something that's on the surface of the narrative. It's they're just issues that come up periodically in the narrative that might be a little different than what a lot of my students are used to. And we'll talk about why do you think this was the case? Why was this African-American teenager not able to do something that maybe you as a teenager could get away with? So I try. The novel is a good novel because the characters are really likable, and I think the novel starts off by having the students will all like these characters, and then as the novel progresses, there's some issues that come up, and the students have already made up their mind that they like the characters, and so that way they're well, that's terrible that this happened to this character. So that's probably one way that I go about it. I'm not really sure if I'm answering your question.
No, you did.
I actually have a question for Dan.
Sure.
Dan, when you say you're an English teacher,
Right.
is a number of your goals, because I'm sure you have a ton of them, are you trying to identify the student that is good at English in terms of reading, or good at, or finding out what student discovers that they're good at reading or in the class? And then are you also trying to, when you discover a student that discovers that they're good at this English thing because it's kind of boring, are you also trying to encourage them and point them in the right direction, be it just a normal student or a student athlete?
I would say yes. It's not like a. Yeah, I would say yes to all of the above, I guess. It's not like on the top of what I'm doing. And I have the curriculum that I have to teach and present, but sort of along with that, as part of the curriculum, that I do try to do all of the above of what you were saying. I don't know, is that helpful, or do you want specifics?
Oh, no, that's awesome. That's awesome. No, that's good. That's good, because from an athletic standpoint, I still remember the teacher that took the time to encourage me to go to college.
What I've noticed. Okay.
No, I remember, I obviously had a lot of teachers, but there's a few teachers that I remember because they took the time, and they may not have spent a lot of time with me, but it might have been one or two words of encouragement or one or two words to get my attention to say, hey, you should think about college. Don't just think about, being an athlete or because when I was growing up, okay, I graduated high school in 1983. That's when a lot of Black athletes were starting to either drop out of high school or graduate high school, but not continue their education in terms of college. So most of the teachers I remember who encouraged me to think about college were female teachers.
Yep.
Right. And so, I write about it in my book. Those just the little words, just one or two words here and there, every now and then, it made a difference.
One of the things I've noticed that there's two thoughts I've had from things you said there is when I was in high school, there was always kind of this myth of the dumb jock.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've noticed, being a teacher now is it seems like the students that are involved in athletics are usually like the higher achieving students.
Yep.
It seems like if they're involved in athletics, they're also involved in other things, and it seems like they have interests and besides just the sports. And then another thing that Bodine was asking, what I do, I have the luxury of having small classes. My classes are usually 20 or less. So I have the luxury of getting to know my students pretty well. And sometimes I'll have them more than 1 year. I might have them for freshman English, and then I might have them again later for senior English. So I find out things that they like. I make mental notes of things that they're interested in, and even if maybe they don't like English, I'll find things that they're interested in, and I'll try to kind of work them in here and there. We'll have a discussion about it, or if we're doing grammar lessons, the sentences I'll put on the board will be about the topic that they're interested in. And we'll do some grammar and maybe take a minute or two and talk about just the topic, talk about what teams they like or what went wrong with last night's game that they watched on television or the game that they were involved in. And then we'll get back to the grammar. And it seems like I kind of can draw students in that way. And it's not all athletics. It's some students are interested in music. Some students are interested in hunting and fishing a lot around where I am. And I do neither, but I'll kind of humor them and ask them if did you see anything last night or over the weekend? Did you went out hunting? Did you see anything? What did you see? And they'll talk about it. And then when we start doing sentences on the board or breaking sentences down, I'll write sentences about them hunting and what they saw, and so it kind of sucks them in. So. And I do have the luxury of doing that because I do have smaller classes, and I'll have students year after year sometimes.
That's pretty good.
Well,
sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say the smaller classes make a big difference, but
yeah.
Demetrius, I know you're going to agree with me. The reason the student athletes today are more focused on their academics and other activities is because of the rules that were put in place,
exactly.
Right, back in the 80s,
Prop 48,
right, because of what was happening prior, meaning in the 70s and in the 60s, where people weren't taking their education seriously,
exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
So those rules that put in place challenge coaches, right? Challenge the coaches to, hey, you've got to get these kids to focus on their academics and go from there. So add to that, Demetrius.
Yeah. So quick note, born and raised in Flint, Michigan, Christopher Paul Curtis is who you're talking about.
There you go. Thank you.
And met him on multiple occasions. It's a great book. I read it to my son when he was 6 or 7, maybe, because I don't think it came out in the mid 90s. Yeah. I met him on more than one. He would do
awesome.
things at the library and different when the book came out in the mid 90s. Great book. A very proud Flintstone. But yeah, your point is so like when they put in the minimum requirements in the mid 80s, it was a big deal. Maybe it was early 80s. And I won't name names. I had friends, right? Because in Michigan, we took the ACT. And I feel like guys needed like a 15, maybe it was lower than that, maybe it was 12. And there were guys who couldn't get it. Now, baseball was different. Like football players and basketball players had a little more cachet, like in Flint, Michigan. But we've touched on so many things, that team building. Those guys on my team, when we're out there, we're sacrificing. You talk about we're working together toward a common goal. And there are white guys that I played baseball with in high school that I'm still friends with today. We've never had a racial conversation. We don't need to have a racial conversation because those kinds of things come with that basic sort of we are together for a common goal, cooperating, working to achieve something. And I'm sweating and you're sweating and I trust you and you trust me. And we're on this journey together. That's the big country journey that he's talking about. Most likely. That's what it felt like when he talked about it. When you feel that, it changes your perspective of literally the world. You start to see, and for some kids like me, it probably happened in high school, and some people it happens in college. I do wonder, Bodine, I'm gonna drop a quick question in the middle of my story. Did it help or hurt, even though you were at Villanova? You're in Philadelphia, right? Right. Did it help
in the suburbs of Philadelphia?
Right. You're in the suburbs of Philly. Does that help at all? Even though you only have 4 teammates, you're in Philly. So, I mean, there's black people around you. Does any of that, and I'm sorry, I haven't read the book. I'm going to for sure. But I wonder if it's something you touched on in the book or is it something that impacted your experience?
What, being very close to the city of Philadelphia?
Yes. As opposed to say, maybe you were at the University of Indiana in Bloomington, Indiana. That would have been a different experience.
Well,
right.
I grew up in Jacksonville, Florida, which back then was the largest city in our union land-wise, 841 square miles. A lot of people didn't know that. And then all of a sudden, Anchorage, Alaska bought more territory so they can put that title on their travel brochure. So I came from a large city in terms of rural area. Our downtown, Jacksonville, is very small, right? Our riverfront. But everything else is, rural and suburban and then farmlands and fruit lands and all that kind of stuff. So once I got to Philadelphia and I was at Cheyney, I was only at Cheyney one semester, but that semester I was at Cheyney, I was so focused on making the team as a walk-on at a Division II school, but also focusing on my academics. This was my first semester ever in college, and I didn't want to disappoint my sisters and my mom. And then when I got to, so I never went anywhere. I never ventured into Philadelphia. I was always on campus, right?
Wow. Okay.
The one time I left campus was my visit to Villanova. That's how I got to Villanova. I went to visit Villanova for a Black Cultural Society party that was being thrown. And that's how I discovered Villanova, right? And Villanova is closer to the city limits of Philadelphia than Cheyney is. Okay. So, but once I got to Villanova, it was a new world. I got to tell you, Villanova was a new world compared to Cheyney. Yeah. So I was able to grow, broaden my mind, broaden my experiences. There were people from all over the world versus at Cheyney, there were people from all over the United States. Yeah. That was a big difference. So Philly became a positive opportunity in terms of folks would say, hey, I got a car, because Villanova is a very affluent school. There were kids driving around with BMWs, Lamborghinis, Maseratis, BMWs, Mercedes. It's an affluent school. So kids had cars. So the chances of a kid saying, hey, let's go get a cheesesteak in Philly was like breathing air, right? So I was able to venture into Philly, and then I began to see Philly and learn about Philly, learn the diversity of Philly, right? South Philly, North Philly, West Philly, right? I was able to learn the pockets of Polish and Jewish and Irish and Black and Jamaican and Dominican. I mean, there's a slew of different nationalities in the city limits of Philadelphia. So I was able to learn more, and I'm gonna fall on the sword. I never knew there was a difference. I grew up in the South where you saw white folks on TV, or you saw white folks if you played against a team that was white, you might have seen a couple of teachers, but I didn't know there was a difference between an Irish and an Italian. I didn't learn that until I got to Villanova. So
Dan,
that was my learning experience.
Dan, you want to give us some final thoughts? And always glad to have you on the show. You bring that educator perspective, and other than we need some other diverse voices, and you bring the voice that's quite different from the three of our experiences, I know. So any final thoughts for tonight, Dan? And we thank you for your time.
No, I think maybe expanding on your last comment about diverse voices, and what Bodine was saying about different neighborhoods, where in the little town where I grew up, and actually where I live now, it was a larger town at one time, but it was divided into certain sections that were like, this is the Polish section, and this is the Italian section, and this is the German section, and the people all gathered in these pockets, and I remember my dad said that the first time somebody from the Italian neighborhood moved into the German neighborhood, it was like they moved a few streets over. It was like a huge deal, and everybody was talking about, oh, they're Italian, and they moved into the German neighborhood, and it was a big deal. And but that now that the people in the town kind of look back at it, and we kind of laugh about it, because nobody says, oh, that's the Italian section anymore, or that's the German section. And so I just kind of hope something like that eventually happens, with our nation, that where we don't look at, it's like there's that group and this group, and they don't intermix, and we don't go in that neighborhood. I just kind of hope that's a trend that we can kind of continue. So that's my last thoughts, I guess.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Dan. We look forward to having you back very soon.
Pleasure to meet you, Demetrius. Pleasure to meet you, Bodine.
Nice to meet you, Dan.
All right. You have a great night, Dan.
Thank you.
Bo, did you want to complete that thought?
Yeah, I mean, so the Philly experience was awesome. I got a chance to hang out with Charles Barkley. I was lucky enough, Demetrius, you definitely want to buy my book. I was lucky enough to babysit. I was lucky enough to babysit a little bit for Mr. Irving, because I never call him Dr. J, because he literally lived down the street from my dorm, my freshman dorm. I got a chance to meet Grover Washington Jr., the jazz player who passed away many years ago. So being closer to Philadelphia gave me an opportunity to learn the differences between folks that look like me who were Black and the differences that we had. Meaning I learned that my personality and a lot of my characteristics were based on the region that I came from. Meaning I came from the South, where folks in the Philly market, they were in the Northeast, right? So we weren't just, I was a Cowboys fan and they were Eagles fans and we didn't like each other, right? There were things that were regional, meaning, we know about the Great Migration. A lot of folks moved from the South to the North, Detroit, right? Yep. For the better job opportunities, education, but also to get away from the hardships of the South. My family did that from Mobile, Alabama, right? My grandmother decided to stay and move to Jacksonville because she got married to her husband, but her siblings moved to Detroit Ypsilanti and all over the Michigan area, right? And I still have family there. As a matter of fact, Demetrius, you may recognize one of my distant cousins is Kay Fielder.
Yes.
Basketball player.
Yep.
And so, but and Villanova literally is 4 miles from the beginning city limits of Philadelphia. Cheney is further out, way out in the burbs. I call it the boondocks, right? So if you wanted to go from Cheney to Philadelphia, the chances are most of your classmates didn't own a car because most of the kids there were lower middle class to poor, right? So their parents couldn't afford to buy them a car. You had to catch a bus. And I never caught a bus in my life until I graduated high school. So I was never going to get on the bus from Cheney to go to Philadelphia and not know the area. But Philly taught me a lot because of all the different personalities, having 4 or 5 different pro teams, right? Philly being back then was the 4th largest market. Now it's the 5th largest market. So, but once I got to Villanova and I got closer, and then the circumstance of Villanova of people having cars, dude, I was in Philly all the time, night clubbing, going to what we call South Street,
Yeah.
Delaware Avenue. So the experience was incredible.
That's cool.
Gentlemen, I'm going to bring in 2 people that are a part of my show every Monday evening. And this is Mr. Robert Ward Williams is the chairman of the San Diego Black Panther Party. And we also have another member of the Black Panther Party, Honeybee, I believe.
Humblebee.
Close.
Humblebee.
Close, but
Okay.
not quite.
Well, hey, Cribbing After Dark. I'm sorry.
Right.
Yeah. But we're talking about inclusion, and I wanted to kind of bring this around to some of the things that might be a little more serious. And one of the things that I've noticed is usually when we have other organizations that become attached to a black movement per se, that group always seems to come out ahead, and we kind of stay where we were, if not losing ground. Brother Williams, would you like to start this conversation off? And as I said, my premise is that if we're talking about inclusion, we also have to accept the premise of exclusion. So why don't you start, Brother Williams?
Well, I believe you're making reference to the fact that, like with the, I would say maybe the LGBT community and some of the things that are taking place with the disparities between, a person's sexuality as being used as a methodology of talking about discrimination as opposed to racial discrimination. And the word discrimination constantly being coined from that standpoint and used to further another cause. Now, I would say this, as we recognize the plight of the African struggle and the Black struggle, we have always been the basic, I would call the poster board or the poster child for any and every movement in terms of maximizing and showing an association so that another cause can have the same similar pains that appear to be on the horizon to garner up the same level of concern to spearhead anything that their agenda may bring. And I would say, to me, that goes right back to just aspects, regardless of what of who we talking about riding the bandwagon. That would just simply go back to the aspects of what I refer to as just, them capitalizing or borrowing from our struggle. And see, these things happen to us as Black people all the time when we talk about dealing with our rights. A lot of times when I see that, it goes into the aspect of drawing out the difference between human rights and civil rights. So it doesn't surprise me that that methodology continues to be used, because it works. When you're talking about anything that goes into uh, working against a system, or working against a what I would call an inherent flaw, then if it continues to work, why throw it away? That goes right back to the whole aspect of dealing with the Willie Lynch syndrome, and how that to this day constantly works. Conquer and divide strategy constantly works. So when something, it always works for the sake of being able to further your cause or further what you want to bring to the table, why stop doing it if it continues to work for you? Now, where does that leave us as Black people in terms of how do we solve this problem? How do we solve the problem of others trying to borrow from our movement and our struggle and our pains and using that to further their gains? I say, to me, the work has to do with what we do, because what you're talking about in most cases, you're talking about a situation where you're dealing with an element that is dealing with an intact identity, versus us Black folks that are constantly at war with one another, as well as trying to get on the same page and decide if we're going to approach our fight from dealing with it from a religious perspective, or we're going to approach it from a civil rights perspective, or we're going to approach it from a humanitarian perspective, which is where I like to come from, or we're going to just protest, ride, what? We're so divided in terms of just our approach to dealing with something. It leaves the wiggle room for other movements to attach to it. And I just kind of think that's where that's going. And I like to let someone else speak on that, and I can kind of just double back on that.
Bodine, what's your thoughts on that? Especially when reading your book, you deal with it from the humanitarian side.
Well, first of all, Brother War, how you doing?
All right, bro.
Pleasure to be here. And I don't have my glasses on. Was it Honeybee?
Humblebee.
Humblebee. Humblebee. Humblebee. I had to put my glasses on. I showed you how I'm getting old. Glad to meet you. When it comes to, again, my perspective, that I like to stay in my lane. I look at everything from a sports perspective, because that's what I know, right? But I also look at it from a socioeconomic perspective, because my book is a binary narrative. It's about sports and diversity and inclusion, but also from the student athlete perspective. What Brother War said, absolutely, it makes a lot of sense. But the remedy to that in sports is having a union and having representation, right? And when you have a union and representation, everybody has to be on the same page in order for the union to go to the powers that be and voice their demands, so to speak. So I agree with you. Being on the same page is important. The problem is if folks don't understand or haven't been part of a team where they have to learn to play together and work together, you're going to have too many chiefs and not enough Indians. Sorry to use that analogy or that cliche. So it's all about folks having the experience of working together, compromising. Everybody, even on the team, may not like all of the same music, But the example I use in my book is, you walk into the locker room on Monday and the brothers have got the rap music on, right? And then down that further in the back of the locker room, you've got my white teammates with the pop music on. And then over in the corner, you got guys with country music on. And all of a sudden, everybody's yelling at each other because one guy says, yo, why are you playing your music louder than we playing ours? So what happens? Coach walks by the locker room, hear guys yelling. Coach comes in the locker room and says, hey, listen, here's how this is going to work. You guys police yourself. You guys work this out, because if I, as the coach, have to get involved, you may not like my decision, right? So we as a team had to come to an agreement. On Mondays, we'll play rap music. On Tuesday, we'll listen to pop. On Wednesday, we'll listen to country. And then on Thursday, we'll listen to rock. And everybody's happy. And the locker room is now peaceful. So the bottom line is, we've got to, in order to work together, we have to bring people together who know how to work together, and then be the example for the folks who don't know how to work together. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Demetrius, come on now.
Yeah, so I like parts of what they both said. Mr. Williams brought a huge point that I think is important when he said something effective is on you. So like maybe I'm in the minority. I've never viewed it as something that takes away from my experience and what I'm trying to do. And within what I'm trying to do, I focus almost exclusively on legislative measures. That's where my focus is. So within my company, I work with an AAPI group. I work with a pride group, because the LGBTQ struggle is very similar to ours. And the struggle we have a women's group. All these groups, we all tie in together. They understand that critical race theory is a big deal. And until we teach kids about it, they understand that. Is that the same the LGBTQ community needs? No, but it all goes back to legislation. It all ties to the 14th Amendment at the end of the day. And when we drive in that narrative of stop putting in systemic legislative measures to hold us down. They're holding us down. They're holding everybody, holding them down. So a lot of them are the same path. I haven't had the experience where working with the AAPI group or the women's group or any other groups that we work with has done anything to hold us back because of what Mr. Williams said. It's on us. I'm not going to let my narrative get drowned out by another one. I will be as loud, if not louder, than anybody else. And sports is another way that you tie that in, which is if all these groups really get it, let's all work together. Let's all work together. And again, my focus mostly is legislative. I think what we did in the past 6 or 7 months in terms of our elections, and they are trying to steal our ability to vote. They're going right to the core now. Let's just stop them from voting, right? That impacts all of us. So I focus more on, look, my struggle is very similar to yours, but the root cause of my struggle, the root narrative of my struggle, even though mine goes back years and years and it impacts education and redlining and housing and financial and loans and criminal justice. Guess what? A lot of that stuff impacts you. For me, it all becomes legislative. And if you get that common narrative, one of my closest allies in my organization is a biracial transgender. One of my best friends in my organization, Alex. Alex is one of the smartest people I know. But when we talk, we always talk from a place of our struggle, right? And I know I have not had any of the experiences that he's had. And he has had some from a biracial standpoint. But not to even make it light, we know who the common enemy is at the end of the day, or what the common enemy is. And I think from that standpoint, I just haven't had the experience where my goals or objectives have been drawn away from by working with other groups. But to Mr. Williams' point, it's what you do. I got to work with the right groups and the right people and not allow them to pull my efforts down. And sometimes it's just, hey, being in the room, being as loud as anybody else in the room, but also cooperating. So I welcome allies from whatever group you are. We can work together.
And I agree with that. What I was going to say real quick is what I'm talking about it from the standpoint of allowing it to be polarized against us. And so that's why I use the concept of something being inherently flawed versus having room to factor in for errors.
Yeah.
So when we're dealing with a system that is inherently flawed, or we're dealing with attacking something that is inherently flawed, you can't have the same approach in terms of solutions as you do with something that simply has errors in terms of the way it's being carried out or a mistake, because the two are totally different, even though the outcome could be the same.
Yep.
And so that's kind of the way I'm getting at with that. Go ahead, James.
Humblebee, you want to contribute here?
Yeah, of course, especially being someone that comes from Pacific Islander background, Black background, LGBTQ, and I've dealt with all of these. I've been in every single situation where there's a different type of protest. One thing I can say is what, just like Brother War said, when it comes to the Black community, unfortunately, the Willie Lynch letter does, or the Willie Lynch syndrome, it does unfortunately affect us as the Black community, because when we're trying to bring everyone together, I've heard multiple times, well, you're lighter skinned, so you don't understand the full struggle. So there's the division in that, but there's also division in the LGBTQ community as well. But when one person in the community sees someone be attacked for something, even though a lot of people are very divided, I've noticed that you've got your lesbians divided from the gay men. They're able to come together and see each other struggle and build on that. So I feel that if we do that with our community, build on that first, and then of course I'm all for working with allies. We, as the Black Panther Party, have marched with AAPI, and I've seen the gay community also, during the whole Black Lives Matter, when it was really going and it was many protests, they put the flags up all over to the community. So of course, having a unity with other groups, it can work, but I feel like we need to be strong in our community as well. You see everyone else able to come together, so we need to come together and do the same thing. But we, unfortunately, because of oppression, we have to fight harder.
Yeah, absolutely.
Bo, you as you said, you look upon a lot of things as from the athlete's perspective. The team concept is the thing that I feel is missing in the unity of minorities. Everyone wants to be captain. Going back to your reference of all chiefs and no Indians, it seems to me that this is if you look at the struggle down through history, this is something that has always followed us. How do we get away from that crab mentality? How do we find the unity within the struggle rather than always trying to find the struggle within the unity?
You have to my experience is when you go through hardships, and you go through hardships with other people that have gone through hardships, you're supposed to learn from your experiences. And when you learn from your experiences, you learn that your story, individual story, has value. I think we talked about this earlier. Has value. It may be a different story, but it still has value. Like the person sitting next to you has a different story, but their story has value. Sometimes people want their individual story to be the biggest story or the most important story. Well, then you're coming from it from a selfish position, right? If, again, I'll use an analogy. If you have 11 guys on offense and the quarterback is the leader of the offense, you got 2 wide receivers, a running back, 2 tight ends, and an offensive line. all 11 players, their main objective is to get a first down. That's their main objective. All 11 players don't do the same thing, meaning they don't have the same job responsibilities. Each wide receiver may have the title of wide receiver, but one wide receiver is running a 10-yard out and the other is running a 10-yard post. The offensive line and maybe 5 offensive linemen, but they all have their own individual job, right? So if everybody understands their role and their job of what they're supposed to do, but the overall main common goal is to get 10 yards to get a first down, then you're going to accomplish that. But soon as one player decides to do something different, that one player can ruin it for that offense. Does that make sense? Yeah. So for that, for the purpose of talking about and putting it the cooperation from a social perspective, we all need, if we're going to talk about getting on the same page and trying to accomplish the same thing, we need to identify what we're trying to accomplish, even though Demetrius is coming at it from a different line or a different position. Brother War is coming at it from a different position. But if we all agree that we're trying to get here, then that's a start. But the problem is everybody isn't in agreement on where we're trying to get to. They may say we're trying to get to this particular position, but their actions doesn't show that they're trying to get to that position. So that's where the confusion and the misunderstanding and the not being on the same page comes from.
Well, let me throw a monkey wrench in that, just from the standpoint of dealing with volunteer organizations, just from the standpoint of dealing with addressing and kind of going what Demetrius is saying, addressing legislation, but dealing with it from the street level or the grassroots level. It would be in sports, think of it as having someone on your team paid to be on your team by the other team, and you not know it.
Right.
Okay. So they're on a they're on a double payroll, and a one play that they could make could jeopardize your team winning. Now imagine that being a daily occurrence in your situation, and put that same scenario in a situation where everybody that's on your team is playing the game for free versus a salary. Also put that in perspective with now everybody that's on your team is playing for free, and you may not necessarily have enough players, or you keep having to rotate or go through players because nobody wants to continue this for free for an indefinite amount of time. Now you come into the world of grassroots organizing. So
and I'm sorry, and none of that works. And none of that works, right? None of it.
It's a struggle. It can work, but it's a battle from here on.
You're pushing a boulder up a mountain. That's hard.
Demetrius, that kind of brings to question the people that you're working with. If this was not a work requirement, would they be as open to the things that you're trying to teach?
Yeah, I don't have the luxury of thinking about that because I know the answer. I know the answer. Right? I told you about a meeting with 25 people and 18 of them were white men. I already know the answer to that question when I walked into that room. And that's why the first thing I told them is, if you don't want to be uncomfortable, you should leave now, because I no longer have the luxury of worrying about being viewed as an angry black man. I said, here's some ground rules. And I laid out a bunch of things. I said, if you mention George Floyd, you say the word murder. Don't say he died. Don't say he was killed. Say he was murdered. If you can't acknowledge that, you don't need to be here. If you can't even do that, you don't need to be here. I said, if you can't look at things like that I'm going to talk about that are going to make you uncomfortable, I'm going to talk about your fragility. If you don't know what driving while black is, okay, I'll teach you that. But don't give me a look like one guy ultimately did, said, does that really happen? Okay, you got to go. You got to go. Those are the rules, right? We're going to talk about this from a place where I can't worry about your comfort anymore. And I told everybody that right up front. Now, I'm on my job, right? I'm still at work. So there are parameters where the company gives me the freedom to do this and the platform to do this at their own risk. And I told them, I'm not sure y'all want this kind of smoke. Not for me. There's other dudes in this organization that might be better for doing this. And they said, no, we want this from you. I said, okay. And once I laid the rules down, I gave everybody a chance to leave the room and they stayed. I stopped caring because there was no other way to do it. There was no other way to get them, because I was trying to evoke emotion. I was trying to impact the way people think within the respect of getting Black people in my company more opportunity, giving us fairer chances, correcting. And I'm just working within the scope of my company and my job. But this building is on the south side of Chicago, and there's 390 Black people working in this building. And there's 6 white people. I have 400 people on the floor. So at the manager level, it stops. At the manager level, it's all white at the top. Below the manager level, it's all Black. A blind person can see that's a problem, and they challenge me with addressing that. So you can't do that worrying about people's feelings. And in general, I think I'm a nice guy, right? I generally do in my life. I care. I care that you guys called her honeybee and not humblebee, and it's right there on the screen. I don't know how that happens, fellas, but that's okay. but in general, I try and do the right thing. But in that case, this was right after the murder. They put this group together and asked me to lead this group 10 days after the murder. And I said, we're going to talk very real. And I think that's part of it for me it's about not just talking, but listening, because I'm talking a lot now. But in that meeting, I did a lot of listening. I listened to some white guys say some stuff that things I didn't want to hear. Right. But I had to hear them to hear that other side. We talked about this earlier. You have to hear that other side. Sometimes it's to challenge it. Sometimes it's to enlighten them and teach them. Sometimes it's just to let them know that's not. Are we after dark? Can I say bullshit? Yeah, we're after dark. It's after 10 o'clock in Chicago. So we have a rule on Mr. King's podcast. It's called After Dark. We can go certain places. That my company, within the parameters of what they asked me to do, allowed me the flexibility to be very real, very real. And I wouldn't have done it if they wouldn't have, because Brother Ward's talked about that, right? It is the analogy he was saying, tying it to sports. To me, it's like they're the Harlem Globetrotters, and we're those other dudes, right? I don't know. I know those dudes can't beat the Harlem Globetrotters, right? They are short players, like you said. Their salary is lower. They don't get training facilities. It's all the disadvantages you talked about. And it's every single day, every single game, every single moment of your life. And that's a great analogy you guys use there. So
yeah, it is after dark. So I'm gonna go here because I thought about this for quite some time. During my day, LGBTQ people were prey. Simple as that. I mean, I used to get on the train on Friday night and go over to New York to roll gays over, in Central Park. That's what we did. Now, making the transition from many things being acceptable. As I said, I've been a Negro, I've been Black, I've been this, I've been that. But it does seem to me that even we as Black people tend to be more tolerable of other people than they are of us. And I'm talking about, even back in those days, I mean, we didn't go in Harlem and rob the gays down there. We went to the white people because those were the ones that had the money. It was just common sense.
So you were just robbing people that had money. Did it really have anything to do with them being gay, or were you just robbing people?
No, they were the most fragile and the most susceptible. You're looking for victims, and they had that victim mentality already. So it wasn't something that you were actually, you know, hey, and I'm talking about the 60s here, you know, and the 70s where we didn't have that type of tolerance. Like you said, you know, we were mostly uh, divided off into different neighborhoods, and actually the people within those groups even considered LGBTQ people prey, or at least less than somebody that was different. We didn't have the type of medical knowledge. We didn't have the type of tolerance that we do now. So how do you find, Humblebee, how do you find that you're being embraced now, and even now you see uh, a rift like between transgender, as you mentioned, gay men and lesbians. I mean, you know, have now that you have become accepted within society, why is there this type of internal strife? Is it once again, as I mentioned before, everyone has to be the face?
That one's kind of hard. I mean, I don't know if it's like that everywhere. Unfortunately, here in San Diego, there is a division. Over the last few summers, they've basically kind of pushed all the black people out of Hillcrest, which is the gay area out here, where they
Right.
don't play our type of music. Um,
I live in North Park, so I know I'm very well aware what you're talking about.
yeah, just for the ones who aren't here, but I mean, I honestly wish I knew. It's unfortunate that the black gay community is not welcomed in the gay community. And there was it about 2 years ago? We were all out, and it was myself and a few other lesbians, and then on the other side of the bar there was a few gay white men, and you know they just for whatever reason just kept feeling like they needed to pick at us, and we ended up getting jumped. And at that point we couldn't figure out what is it that we need to understand, why is it that we have to divide. um so we still made it a point to continue to try to go out and try to be friendly with them. And that's where I get the point where you guys are saying that, or where you said that for whatever reason black people are accepting of everything else, everyone else, but for whatever reason we cannot get that same acceptance. um, I mean, I trust me. I wish I knew why there is such a division. It's something that I talk about within my community because it's not just the blacks against the other races; it's blacks against each other as well. You've got your black lesbians who are more butch, who don't like all the other butch ones. If you're not a part of their clique, and you've got the lesbians that don't like the black gay men because they're too flamboyant, and they don't like it because for whatever reason the black lesbians feel like they have to be so masculine. There's a lot of things that need to be fixed within that community as well. So if I had an answer, trust me, I'd give it to you. But I'm still in the process of trying to figure that out as well. So I'm fighting a double battle, trying to help out my black community, but also trying to help out the gay community as well.
Brother Williams, once again, I come to this word inclusion. Is there really such an animal as inclusion? I mean, you know, we can do everything on paper, but how do we change the mindset?
I would say, and I like to address this by first starting off with the idea of what I get into with our recruits when we're going through recruit training. And the first class that we go over is critical thinking. That's class number 1. Class number 2 is dealing with the earth carrying capacity. Why do I cover that next? Because as people get involved in the human rights struggle, as we get involved in addressing oppression, then you also got to turn right around and recognize the fact that humanity is terms of overpopulating the planet, in terms of how we continue to grow and grow and grow in our numbers on, and that coupled with capitalism, coupled with fascism, coupled with the fact that how we treat the planet goes into how we treat each other. The more of us that are on the planet, the more of us that are in a consolidated, condensed area, the more things are going to go astray. The more people are going to have cliques. The more people are going to try to find their own niche and identity to stand out amongst the crowd. That comes with numbers. So with the Earth's population constantly increasing, is going to constantly increase in terms of tribalism. So a lot of the stuff I think that we're talking about really goes right back to the inherent. Let me go back to that, my key word for today, the inherentness of dealing with larger numbers. The larger numbers create more cliques, create more division, and so on and so forth. Regardless of what the cornerstone of that division is, just like how us that are not in the LGBT community, we don't know the difference. So to us, they are one and the same, but to them, they break it down, and there's other reasons why. Just like in the what I would call the pro-black community, people may look at the Black Panther Party and the new Black Panther Party as being all the same, where there's over a dozen different variations of Panther parties, and I bet that James, you, Demetrius, and Bo probably didn't know that. As far as y'all concerned, a Black Panther is a Black Panther. See, so division is inherently a part of larger, constantly growing groups that continue to grow and grow and grow. So as humanity is growing, so does the problems that come along with the rate of growth that have to be resolved. So what we're talking about is fighting, like how Bo was talking about. You're pushing a boulder uphill. We're dealing with things from the perspective of trying to address division amongst a growing population. So how do you prevent dividing but still increase? It's going to be something that's constantly, forever going to have to be calibrated overall. So the best you can do is work with with what you got, and at the same time try to continue to corner your narrative and work with more and do the best you can to unify within the relationships you can garnish with other people around that narrative at that point in time. So for instance, some of the things that Humblebee is talking about reflects, like how she said, that regardless of where you are within that community, you find that being Black is the foundation in terms of certain aspects of discrimination. So behind that, she's able to come into the Black Panther Party, and we completely embrace her in all of her background, because she recognized the core element of the problem that we're all trying to address. And in doing so, she's provided tools that she can also take back to that community and address some of the ills and things that go on with that community. Because regardless of what type of division we're talking about, there are certain things that go into what we need to do as humans to address ourselves in terms of unification. Going back to one of the things that one of y'all talked about relationships and compromises. Every relationship, which is basically any conversation or any involvement I have with another being, is a relationship. That is going to create a position of compromise, because no two people on this planet are alike. So therefore, even when we come together with the same end goal, we are still having a diverse background and a diverse dynamic and environment that we all grew up in. So therefore, there's going to be a point to where there's going to be a fork in the road within our methodology of conversation. So now, how do we get past that hump when we talk about me wanting to go this way and you wanting to go that way, but eventually we converge back at the main point? There is going to be compromise. So unity and our ability to address, going back to what I said earlier, the biggest thing that continues to work against humanity is conquer and divide strategy. So now what you're talking about is the inherent law of natural law that goes along with a population and a populace that increases. So from a psychological warfare standpoint, why would I not be able to stand back as an enemy or as a counter to that operation, recognize that as your numbers grow, it will inherently have people that think differently. So if I inject somebody to agitate that difference, then it will create a situation that will cause you not to be able to focus on your main objective. And that is being done time and time and time again. And the undergirth of that is we're not recognizing that. So that's why I went back on talking about polarity. We have to get away from polarity. You know, former President Trump, that was his ace boom tactic that he used: create polarity, create chaos, create division, and keep people fighting each other for over their differences. And I really think that's the thing about that.
Bo, and I'm going to go back once again, to the athletic perspective here, because I remember when we played football or basketball, whatever, and you had a gay guy on the team. Back in those days, in the 80s, we might have called him Sweet. But they were a part of the team, so you ignored that preference or whatever. And we didn't address that. We were kind of like ostriches with our heads in the sand. What do you think about the way that this was handled in athletics in the 80s, and now in 2021, you have an active NFL player that comes out?
Well, again,
like I said, I ask hard questions. I don't throw a lot of smooth.
What I bring to the table is my experience. And I believe in two foundations: just spiritual foundation and the foundation of sports, right? I grew up going to church, Sunday school first, and then church. So I'm one of those kids that grew up in a Southern Baptist church that was in church 5 hours every Sunday, right? Started out with Sunday school, had a break, and then went to church.
I appreciate you, brother. I was a preacher's kid. I understand. I appreciate you. Hey, Sunday, right? Wednesday, Friday. Yeah. I know exactly where you're coming from.
And my grandmother was the head usher. So when you're the grandkids of the head usher, you were limited to what you could do. You had to learn. Now, the foundation of sports is those terms. If you have a good coach or a great coach, and coaches are basically teachers, what were you taught as an athlete? Trust your teammate, discipline, right? Control your emotions while you're on the field, right? Have each other's back. There are all those terms you heard as an athlete and a teammate is what's the foundation of sports. So when you have those two things to fall back on, meaning ingrained in you, when it comes time, you're presented with someone who's different, right? It's do unto others if you will have them do unto you. It's the golden rule, right? Treat somebody the way you want to be treated. So I just found out while I was writing my book that I had a gay teammate. I didn't know he was gay. Only his roommate knew he was gay. And his roommate was sworn to secrecy, right? So in the 80s, coming out or being out or announcing that you were gay was not the way it is today. It would have been very difficult in a football locker room in the 80s for that to happen. Would it have had an effect on me? No, because not only was I an athlete, my dad was a musician. So we had to enroll and take, I was in the school choir, right? I was in the school choir in junior high and senior high because my dad was a music teacher and a musician. My music teacher in junior high was a gay man, but he was a closeted gay man because he was married as a front, so people wouldn't automatically assume he was gay. So he was basically shielding what he was, right? So having a relationship with a teacher who is our teacher, who we're learning from, we're learning how to sing, right? We're learning the Black national anthem. Right? That's part of my experience. So I just had a different and still have a different perspective on people who identify in different ways than I do, because I have empathy, right? I grew up learning to have empathy for people who go through struggles the way I might go through struggles. I don't envy anyone. I'm not jealous of anyone, because it was ingrained in me in church. You don't have a reason or a right to be jealous of anybody. That's not God's way. Now, I'm not a Bible thumper, even though I grew up in the South. But again, those teachings are in my heart and in my head. So when I am approached with situations, I have my feet on solid ground and I'm able to embrace whatever's in front of me. So not everybody has that experience. Not everybody have those tools and those skills to be able to navigate how to handle different situations and different scenarios. And a lot of people don't know how to deal with their inner emotions of jealousy and keeping up with the Joneses and all those other things that prevent you from being your best self, right? A lot of things can hold people back and they don't realize what's holding them back. You know, being self-aware is a powerful thing, right? Knowing who you are is a powerful thing. A lot of people don't know who they are.
Most people don't.
Demetrius, I've been taking anger management for about 42 years. I think I know who I am. What's your thoughts on Mr. Sanders' remarks there?
So I'm a Detroit Lions fan, so I need anger management. And we're going to talk about that on the other one. We'll talk about that on the sports pod. I have to go back to and kind of piggyback on both of the guys, right? Because it boiled down to two things I was thinking immediately, and then they both took them both. So this don't sound like my original thought, but I promise you it was. Critical thinking is so huge, right? Right now, people don't understand the concept of critical thinking. And then the simple empathy piece. And that's what it is. So if I'm sitting in that club between Humblebee and her friends and these gay white dudes, my first thing is, wait a minute. What y'all doing is wrong, right? Just from a critical thinking standpoint, the way you group of gay white men are deciding whatever you're deciding, that's just bad thinking. You're not thinking this through well. So you need to look at other perspectives. You need to consider alternative opinions and decide before. But then there's a piece that says, wait a minute, I have the ability to have a sensitivity to a situation that is someone else's, that is not mine. I can appreciate diversity and I can value it. So then when it's time to dance, I'm with Humblebee and her friends and I'm going to jump in the fight because it's wrong. And that's what Mary and Matt taught me. I would like to give you guys some big old speech about all these things I learned. Nah, it goes back to two people. And just raising me and my brothers and my sister in Flint, Michigan. You can't watch wrong. You don't get to watch wrong. That's just not how we do it. And my dad's speech was simple. That's my last name. I just let you borrow it, right? Don't do anything to embarrass it, and you better hold it up, right? You can't watch wrong. And it's simple. And if you have empathy, like Bodine said, you have the ability to go, I'd have been like, wait, why we after dark, right? Why y'all fucking with them? That would have just been what would have immediately struck within me. And then right or wrong, and I probably would have been wrong. I'd have been like, let me roll my sleeves up. We get ready to dance. And if you truly feel it's wrong, that's just what comes out of you. Because watching wrong, then you got to evaluate yourself. If you just sit and you watch wrong, you need to look in the mirror. And so I like to be that. If you truly have the empathy that Bodine talked about, the capacity for understanding and sharing the feelings of somebody else, like something, this isn't about me. And charity work has brought that out of me. 25-year-old me wasn't like it. 25-year-old me was about me and the stuff I cared about. But working with Big Brothers and a couple of other organizations, it has given me the opportunity to go, wait, doing something that's not at all about me, that ain't bad. That ain't a bad thing. That feels pretty good. And if I'm leaving a rally on critical race and I sit next to Humble Bee and her friends, we have some shared experiences. I can adapt. I can understand. I can relate. And when these guys decide to come over and they want to dance, then, they got one more person in the dance at least because, I can't watch wrong. I can't watch wrong.
If you don't mind, Mr. King, let me just add a little bit. I love Demetrius' approach and his honesty and the way that he was able to articulate what he said.
Yep.
I agree with what he said, but you don't have to believe that I agree with what he says. When he buys my book and read what I wrote, he'll understand what I said, because I have the exact example. I went to jail for beating up two white guys because after hanging out with Charles Barkley, I decided to walk to the next destination. We were doing what we call the crawl. We go from one bar to the next, to the next, to the next, have one drink and keep it going, right? I decided to walk instead of jump in the car with everybody and go to the next bar. I'm walking down the street. There are 9 young, and you can tell they were high school black girls walking down the sidewalk. 2 white guys come out of a bar, run through them, and literally knocked half of the girls into the street and the other half into the grass. Now, as much as I like to say I am a diplomatic person and I'm a reasonable person, I would be lying if I didn't say I was also taught by my uncles, don't take anything from bullies and don't let bullies be bullies. So I would have been in the same position with Humbly as you would, or as most people would, because when you see wrong, you can't sit back and let wrong happen, because then you're allowing it to perpetuate and continue forever, right? So I just had to say, I didn't go there, but I'm glad you went there, because a lot of people are now learning you can't be on the sidelines. You can't be that person that's being on the sideline. Either you're in the fight or you are part of the problem.
Yeah. I do challenge your critical thinking for leaving Barkley. Why wouldn't you just stay with Barkley? I get critical thinking on that, bro. I do.
Because I was going to meet them anyway.
I'm with Chuck. I'm right next to Chuck the whole time.
Remember, Chuck always got into fights in the 80s anyway. So he was
probably with Chuck. It's better than getting in a fight without Chuck.
As always, we do manage to have a little fun and be informative as well. Demetrius, just a little inside joke. You can see I'm always on time here also. So, yeah.
Well, it's not my fault on the Thursday Night Podcast when we go 40 minutes over every week.
No, hey, I just like to talk with people, man. I wish I could get unlimited time, but unfortunately, and other than you and Bo, the rest of us are out here in California, so we don't care whether you sleep or not. So
y'all ain't even had dinner yet. I'm getting ready to go to bed.
I got an op-ed to write, so I'm gonna be up till 3.
Well, why don't you give us your final thoughts, Bo? And it was good having you back on the show. I'll make sure Demetrius gets all the info that he needs as far as your book.
Nah, book's good. I'm gonna have a book ordered before I go to bed tonight. Don't worry.
So why don't you give us your final thoughts, Bo?
My final thoughts is that, again, we are at a point in time where we are making, we're using our voices. All of us are finding ways to use our voice or are using our voice to push what we're trying to accomplish. And we all have a role to play, right? We all have a role to play. And in order to quickly move and advance what we're trying to accomplish, we need to get on the same page. And I don't know how we're going to do it or who is going to spearhead getting on the same page, but there's a role to play for the Black Panthers, hopefully all of the Black Panther organizations, especially if they're, you know what I mean? If they all have the same goal, like if you know what I mean? So if we're all striving to advance, we need to find a way to be able to stay in our specific lane, do our role, but still do it and end up meeting, as Brother War said, we're still meeting at the goal line to score a touchdown. So I think that's happening. And we're bringing our allies with us. A lot of allies are coming along with us, and we can't leave our white brothers and sisters who are true allies, not the ones who are faking the funk. No, our true allies, because if you look at history, we've always had true allies that didn't look like us, who were fighting behind the scenes, i.e., right? Harriet Tubman, I'll give you a perfect example. Harriet Tubman, we all know who Harriet Tubman is and was. What a lot of people don't know is Thomas Garrett and the Garrett family, a bunch of white, what do they call them? Pennsylvania Dutch, right? They funded Harriet Tubman's Underground Railroad, right? They built a fake hardware store in downtown Wilmington, right at the train tracks, right at the railroad tracks, that same railroad tracks that President Biden would ride as a senator from Washington back to Wilmington. They built a fake hardware store where they sold goods and used those goods to fund Harriet Tubman, her Underground Railroad process. A lot of people don't know that because nobody talks about it on a larger scale, right? So knowledge, we all heard this before, knowledge is power. The more information we have, the more we can do with it, right? So it's all about information, building coalitions, building, right, collaborating. And the more we collaborate, because I'm not going to ask Brother Water change his personality, his identity in order to join the crew. No, we need a Mike Tyson, right? we need a Ronnie Lott, right? we need a Bo Jackson, right? And we need a Deion Sanders, but we also need a Tom Brady, right? We also need a Tom Brady. So if we all can understand that if we're all going in the right direction, but we all have a role to play, then we can start to seriously make some serious change. I hope that makes sense.
It does.
Thank you so much, Bo. I look forward to having you back on the show. I'm sure we can apply your book as well as some of your critical thinking to a lot of subjects that we talk about here on the Political Consciousness of West Coast Steeler Fans. So thank you so much for your time once again, and I look forward to talking to you.
I'll send you a picture of me holding my book when I get it.
Bo, why don't you tell everybody where they can find your book? Tell everybody where they can
first of all,
find your book.
you got it. I want to hear from all of you. If you have any questions, shoot me an email. Brother King has got my contact information. Feel free. But my website is bo-deansanders.com, and I'll hold my book up slowly so people can see it.
It's easy to find. It did not take me long to find it. Throw in your name
Yep.
and all the links come up. All
Yep.
the links come up.
Yep.
It is not
Very
hard to
easy
find.
not easy to find. Bodine Sanders.
Yep.
Either I'm going to pop up, or Barry Sanders is going to pop up, or Deion Sanders is going to pop up. That's all you got to do. Is
Barry stuff for about an hour, then I get to order the book.
That's all. Once you Google, it's going to be the three of us. All right, y'all have a good one. I appreciate the time.
Thank you. You have a great night, Bo.
You got it, man.
Demetrius, a little different circumstances tonight. And as I said, you can see I'm always right on time. So why don't you give us your final thoughts and tell people where they can find you.
Sure. First, it was a pleasure meeting both of y'all and having this conversation. I appreciate it. My stuff is mostly sports related. I got into this podcast game on sports function. So I do a Detroit Lions specific podcast after every game, like 30 minutes after the game, capturing that sort of. I mean, I'm a Lions fan. I'm pissed off probably. Right? they just found a new way to lose a game, and I just want to open up the microphone and be that fan talking about what it's like to be a Lions fan, because y'all probably don't know. Y'all out there in California chilling. Even if you're a Steelers fan, it's a different kind of world rooting for this team. But he talked about the migration. Both my parents came up from Alabama and settled in Flint, Michigan, and I got introduced to this team at 7, and that's it. It's a wrap. So my podcast is called the Roar Podcast. Much more during the season. In the off season, we do a couple, but it's about the game. I get on 30 minutes out of the game. I talk about that game. And then I do it again the next week. So for some reason that I still don't know. But in terms of tonight, so you can find me at the Roar Podcast, pretty much anywhere. But one thing we touched on quite a bit tonight, and I think both of you guys touched on it, I think it's so big, it's like valuing diversity and understanding critical thinking. I spend a lot of time within my organization focused on this. I talked about it a little bit earlier. What I find is that people struggle with people who are different than them. And it blows my mind. Just because of the way I was raised, right? I talk about my mom and dad all the time, and I just say Mary and Matt. Their idea was simple. You can value similarities in people, and you can value differences in people. You're going to meet unique people in your life. My mom's best friend was a very unique lady on a lot of levels. And I won't, but, and I used to ask her, why are you friends with that woman? Because I personally did not see the value. My mother was this really, really nice lady, in my opinion. And she said, there's value in being her friend. There are things about her you don't know. She makes me smarter. She shows me things I should do, I shouldn't do. Just the simple valuing diversity is a massive struggle within my organization, what I'm dealing with there. And I think it's probably on a larger scale the same thing. If we just treat each other like human beings, start there, leave all the rest of it out. Human beings, right? If you're a faithful person, just a child of God, that's it. And Brother War, you talked about, don't ever give up yours. I can align with someone else. I can work in other groups. Anybody who knows me, they'll tell you that dude doesn't stop talking. Right. He's going to mention critical race theory. Talk to him for 2 minutes because I believe that's the next step. You got to teach these white kids in school the impact of slavery, the impact of Jim Crow, the impact. They don't know. And their parents are like, oh, no, don't tell them. We don't want them to know. We just want to pretend that shit didn't happen. No. We're still dealing with this today. Today, we still deal with this. And if you don't teach them what this country was, they can't possibly understand what it is. And they don't have a shot of understanding what it could be, which is the real goal. I think those points, critical thinking, valuing diversity, those are things that they fuel me right now. And it was, I was confused at Breonna, then Ahmaud. I just thought, what the hell? And then when they murdered George Floyd, I lost it. I was just a calm, regular black dude living my life, and I lost it. And I've calmed down since then. We got that clown out of the White House. Then we had to do in Georgia. I don't care. I mean, it's after dark. I can say anything. So those are my things. Value, diversity, and critical thinking cannot be understated. We just have to think better, be smarter. So I appreciate it. Thanks. I hope Mr. King, you have me back on here. I enjoy talking to you guys and hearing more, even though you're out in sunny California. I'm in Chicago, and it's almost 11 o'clock, and y'all ain't had dinner yet. So, all right, go ahead, Mr. King.
All right, Demetrius. I'll see you Thursday, my man.
All right, appreciate it.
You have a great night.
All right, you guys have a good one.
Yeah. Humble B, I know it's been a while since I let you chime in. So why don't you give us, your thoughts for the evening, and tell us, anything that you think, might help us to understand the struggle within the LGBTQ community.
Well, of course, as Brother Ward mentioned, we're dealing with a community where, I mean, you live not too far, so you see that the majority in that community is the white groups, and they, I'm not trying to speak for all of them, but I know that most of them, they've been able to live their life the way that they see fit because they are more accepted in their neighborhoods. And going into critical thinking, trying to understand other people's diversity, even, which is why I'm able to say I don't really understand why everyone has to be so divided, especially within the Black community. Because if I can sit there and I can look at the situation where I know that there, when you see the flamboyant Black guy who is just extremely extra, you have to remember that probably when he goes home or when he's with his family, he has to put on this masculine persona, and he feels like once he's out, he can finally be himself and let himself go. And then you have the masculine Black women who are forced to wear dresses, go to church, or when they go to church, and they're forced to be feminine around everyone. So then when they go out, they feel like, let me let my masculine side out. And I think that's where the Black community butts heads. And I feel like that's where they need to have a clear understanding. Everyone is finally coming out to an area where you can be yourself and be a little bit more understanding of the fact that they're finally getting to express themselves. And I'm sure that you're, whoever, the masculine Black lesbians are also finally getting to express themselves as well. So why not have just a clear understanding that there is a diversity, but there's also a huge similarity. You guys are both being extra because of the fact that you have to hide it. So that's one thing I want people to understand about the gay community, especially the Black gay community. It's not all rainbows and sunshine. We have our struggles too. And one thing I want it to do is to get our community to understand, that your differences are so similar.
I've kind of watched what you're talking about, because I moved out here in 2003, and not knowing the area, the first place that I moved into was right off University Avenue, called Friendship Hotel. And it happened to be Gay Pride Week. And coming here from Pennsylvania, I had never seen anything like this at all. I think my first encounter was 200 women on motorcycles with their girlfriends. And I had never seen, other than going to, seeing pictures of that, in New York, I had never seen anything like this. And it was kind of a culture shock. And then I end up moving into North Park, and you can see we have new construction, we have new restaurants since the pandemic, and you have a community that comes together. I mean, I can go 3 blocks from me and see numerous gay pride flags and things of that nature. And it is very, very much acceptable. And as you say, you see a lot of flamboyancy, and you don't, really think of this as a group that is not cohesive. When we hear LGBTQ, we assume as everything else, just like Brother Williams was saying before, when you say Black Panther Party, you assume that it's all one thing. You don't realize that there's still diversity within that group. So I think once again, it's when it comes to inclusion and diversity, I think we tend to put other groups' needs ahead of ours as Black people. And sometimes I wonder if that's not, um, as we say, the generosity of our nature, the human being side of us. Uh, Brother Williams, what do you think? Are we too human or too soft to play this hardball?
Well, I would say, and I like to always use examples within nature to get us to broadly understand why we are that way. If you take a people, or let's just use nature again in a lower animal for right now. If you take a wolf, as soon as you try to approach that wolf in its natural environment, it will defend its territory, defend who it is, where it is, and what it is. If you, by some ability, be able to capture that wolf, take it out of its environment, strip it of everything that it knows that made it what it was, which was a wolf that dominated its environment, that knew how to navigate its environment, knew how to live, how to survive, and you place it in a position to where now its entire life was completely dependent upon your willingness to give it a place. So you provided its food, clothing, shelter, way of life, and everything. Over time, it's called breaking. You broke that wolf and you changed it into something other than itself. At that point, now that that wolf is dependent upon you for his every need, if someone tries to go in that backyard where that wolf stands, where the only thing stands between that wolf and that wolf's master, that wolf will now fight the invader to protect the same thing that enslaved it in the first place. So when you talk about us as Black people, why are we so out to basically embrace everything else and help other things? Because the nature of what happens to a domesticated animal is that it serves others first and foremost before it knows how to serve itself and deal with self-determination. Self-determination has been stripped from us, but serving has not. So we naturally serve and help other people before we help ourselves because of our lack of identity, our lack of inner strength and bond that we have to something that holds us to a higher position within the ecosystem. So it is inherent that's why we operate the way we do. So how do we address this? We address this by gaining our identity back, gaining our purpose, and gaining our substance as a people here within the United States and in the diaspora, where you find that we have been what I refer to as buck broken Africans. And so from that standpoint, it is again natural that we help others along and then get back to ourselves. That goes right along with being domesticated. And so we have to go back to the root cause of why we operate the way we do, and then we'll see why we operate the way we do. And in order to address it and deal with from the position of a solution, is something where it goes back to us gaining our identity. As we gain our identity, then we recognize the importance of staying in our lane. And as we stay in our lane, does that mean we can't help somebody on the side of the road? No, we can. The point is, I'm going this direction. I see someone with a flat tire. Yeah, I can pull over and help them. But do I literally give them my car and let them go down the street, and then I'm left with figuring out how to fix the tire and how to get this car off the road and so on and so forth? See, that's what a domesticated being would do. A domesticated being would hand them the keys over to my car and then I worry about everything else. That their baggage, the baggage that they left. So we have to get out of that mode, and it goes back to a formalized, going, we say systematic and systemic nature that has been taught to us as Black people. So on top of the oppression that we face, part of that oppression is able to live through us being inferior. And an inferiority is what causes us to help others first and foremost before we help ourselves. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't help others, but I'm saying that what we're dealing with is we're faced with a condition of being domesticated as a people. And that's what makes us soft.
Hey, very good insights there, brother. And I look forward to talking to you again next week. Thank you. Thank Humblebee. And any activities planned?
Yeah, we're still doing our back to school supply drive, which is taking place this Wednesday at the MLK Park, 6401 Skyline Drive, from 5:30 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. So we ask that the community comes out and support us to help support the youth. So we have that going on this Wednesday, and it will continue until we get enough supplies to make a significant impact on a few select organization or children that we're working with. And if you have any questions or want to know more about the San Diego Black Panther Party, we have a website, which is blackpantherpartysd.org. That's blackpantherpartysd.org. So you can reach us through that. And we also have Facebook, Black Panther Party San Diego, through the Facebook and Instagram. So from that, I just like to end with, the idea here, and what I push every Monday is that we have to find more ways to figure out how to unify, come together, and work together as a people. And I don't think that there is enough of us on the front line, like the people that we have on your podcast. So we're open to, people joining the ranks. We're open to helping and assisting people to just jump on the front line in any grassroots movement or anything that's going to deal with bringing our people together to fight oppression.
Brother, I have to ask you about an update. We've talked about it on the program before. The young man that was shot, I believe he was run over Thanksgiving Day or Thanksgiving Day Eve. We had heard you had some, I think you sent me an independent autopsy report, but I haven't heard anything really about that since. Is there any updates?
No, I don't have any update on that with Tariq Harris, because it came a point to where him and his organization were running on a different path than where we were going. And so unfortunately, I haven't been in the works with him on those matters, but it kind of goes back to some of the same thing we're talking about, is we have to figure out ways to continue to work with each other to address the same ills and conditions that happen to us as Black people. And that's just one of the many examples that we have to push out there and thrust for, regardless of our standing with one another.
Well, I just wanted to see if there was any updates. So thank you so much, Brother Williams. I look forward to talking to you, and Humblebee, as always. It was a pleasure talking with you and learning a little bit more about your community. And I look forward to talking to everyone again next Monday. So next Monday, we will be talking, we'll be concluding our series on critical race theory versus culturally reformed teaching. So look forward to ending up this series. Thank you very much for your participation, and look forward to talking to everyone next week. Thank you, Brother Robert. Thank you, Humblebee. Have a great night, everyone, and we'll talk to you next week. All power to the people.